There are stories that find us when we need them most, arriving like unexpected visitors on a dusty afternoon. This is one of those stories about a woman who learned to live at the edges of things, and a man who discovered that sometimes the best help comes from the places we're told not to look. Set in a small frontier town in 1883, it speaks to anyone who's ever felt invisible, who's done good work without recognition, or who's wondered if they'll ever be seen for who they truly are. It's about the bread we break, the meals we share, and how the simplest acts of cooking can become acts of grace. Most of all, it's about second chances, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet ones that come disguised as ordinary Tuesday mornings. The widow's hands had been in dough since 4 o'clock, and now, as gray light crept across the kitchen, she noticed the flour handprint on her black dress. 3 years of mourning, and still the flour found ways to mark her. She didn't brush it away. Through the window, she watched Samuel Henderson's wagon roll past without slowing. His wife would be at the general store later, speaking in that careful voice people used with her, now not unkind, just hollow, like talking to an echo. The bread wouldn't wait for her wandering thoughts. She shaped the 12th loaf with practiced movements, her knuckles pressing deep. The hotel wanted their dozen by 6. They paid in coins left on the back step, no hands meeting, no need for morning pleasantries, just bread and money, clean as arithmetic. Tommy Sullivan was out there again. She'd noticed him 3 mornings running, the boy sitting on the fence rail across from her cottage, swinging his legs and watching her windows, 7 years old, maybe 8. His mother had been dead 6 months now, Martha Sullivan, who used to buy 2 loaves every Saturday, who touched the widow's hand once at the church door and said, "Your bread tastes like comfort, Mrs. Tate." Now Martha was gone, and her boy sat on fence rails at dawn, watching a widow's house like it might tell him something. The widow Elizabeth, though few called her that anymore, kept her eyes on her work. The boy would tire of watching. They always did. Children had short memories for grief, which was God's mercy, she supposed. By the time the hotel boy arrived, silent as always with his wooden collection box, she had the loaves wrapped in clean cloth. He left $7 in coins. She counted them twice, not from distrust, but from habit. $7. The rent was $9. October was 8 days gone. She washed the dough from her hands in the basin, the water cold enough to make her bones ache. Through the window, the Sullivan boy was gone. At 10 o'clock, she walked to Hendricks's general store. The morning had warmed some, but she kept her shawl pulled tight. The black dress drew sun like a sponge draws water. 3 years was too long for mourning, she knew. The proper time was 2. But changing to gray seemed like admitting something she wasn't ready to name. Mrs. Patterson stood at the counter, her voice carrying clear to the door. "Told Harold we should organize something. Christian charity. You understand. The woman needs proper work." Mrs. Hendricks murmured something low. "Well, she can't live on hotel bread forever, and it's not fitting. A woman alone in that cottage. People talk." Elizabeth's hand stayed on the door handle. She could turn back, come later, but later meant fewer choices in the fabric remnants, and she needed thread for mending. She pushed inside. The bell chimed sharp as judgment. Mrs. Patterson turned, her face shifting through expressions like shuffled cards, surprise, discomfort, then that bright, hollow kindness. "Mrs. Tate, I was mentioning to Mrs. Hendricks about some mending work. The parsonage has a terrible pile of it. Charity work, of course, but it pays a little something." Elizabeth nodded, moving toward the thread display. "That's kind of you." "Mrs. Patterson, Tuesday mornings would be best. You could work in the church basement, more proper than well. than working alone. The thread cards blurred together, black, brown, white, simple choices. I'll consider it. Mrs. Patterson gathered her purchases, papers rustling like disturbed birds. You do that. We must help each other, mustn't we? In Christian fellowship after she left. Mrs. Hendricks measured out 2 yards of calico in silence. When Elizabeth counted out coins, the shopkeeper's hand touched hers briefly. The hotel wants to increase to 15 loaves, she said quietly. Starting Monday, if you can manage it. I can manage it. Outside, the sun had climbed higher. The Sullivan Ranch wagon sat outside the feed store, one wheel propped for repair. Through the store window, she glimpsed Tom Sullivan's broad back, his hat in his hand as he spoke with Mr. Daniels. The boy Tommy sat on the wagon seat, legs swinging the same restless rhythm as this morning. Their eyes met through the glass. The boy's face opened into something raw, not quite a smile, more like recognition, as if he'd found something he'd been looking for without knowing its name. He raised one small hand. Elizabeth walked on without waving back. Kindness to the boy would be misunderstood. Everything was misunderstood now. That was the way of widowhood, every gesture examined, every word weighed for improper meaning. At home, she unwrapped Mrs. Patterson's mending, 3 shirts, 2 pairs of boys' pants, a torn pillowcase, charity work, $2 if she was lucky. She threaded her needle and began, the October light falling across her hands, across the black dress with its flower handprint, across the empty chair where no one sat to keep her company. But she thought of 15 loaves instead of 12, $3 more a week, October's rent within reach. The needle moved in and out, sure as breathing. Through the window, the fence rail stood empty, but she knew the boy would be back tomorrow. They always came back, the motherless ones, drawn to kitchens that smelled of bread, to women who knew about empty chairs. She would pretend not to see him. That was kindest. In the end, the thread pulled tight, closing another tear, making something whole that had been broken. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Tom Sullivan's knuckles scraped against the cast iron as he reached for the smoking pan. The eggs had gone brown at the edges, liquid yellow pooling in the center. Tommy stood on the stool beside him, spatula shaking in his small grip. I can do it, Pa. The spatula was half the boy's height. Tom watched his son's wrist bend wrong, trying to get the leverage. The egg folded into itself, shell fragments mixing with the mess. I said I can do it. Black smoke rolled up from the porridge pot. Tom grabbed the handle barehanded, then jerked back. The pot crashed against the floor. Gray paste splattered across the boards, across Tommy's bare feet. The boy's face crumpled, not crying yet, but close. Tom grabbed a rag, wrapped his hand, moved the pot to the cold side of the range. The porridge had formed a thick black crust on the bottom, ruined like yesterday's beans, like the biscuits before that. Bootsteps on the porch. Jake Harris and 2 other hands stood at the door, not coming in. Can't work hungry. Sullivan scraped at the egg pan, metal on metal, sharp enough to set teeth aching. There's cornbread from yesterday. That weren't cornbread. That was clay brick. The other 2 hands stayed quiet, but their eyes said enough. Harris shifted his weight. Mrs. Dalton's hiring for fence work. 3 squares a day plus wages. They were already walking away. Tom counted their shadows crossing the yard. 9 hands left. Started with 12 last month. Tommy climbed down from the stool, spatula still clutched tight. Yellow egg dripped onto his nightshirt. The boy walked to the flour bin in the corner, lifted the lid, looked inside. Empty, except for dust and weevils. Mama kept flour here. Tom's throat closed. He turned to the ledger open on the table. Yesterday's numbers hadn't changed. Feed bills, wages, the new harness on credit, all of it balanced against cattle he couldn't get to market without fed workers. Tommy had climbed into the empty flour bin, curled up like a cat in the dark space. His voice echoed from inside. "Smells like her." Tom pulled his son out, set him on his feet. The boy's eyes were dry but wide, looking at something that wasn't there. Mrs. Dalton wouldn't help. Already asked twice. The hotel cook worked dawn to midnight. That left one name, circled in pencil at the ledger's margin: the Widow Tate. Tom's boots struck the packed dirt road harder than necessary. Tommy trotted beside him, trying to match his father's stride. The widow's cottage sat at the town's edge, where the road turned to prairie close enough to walk, far enough to avoid casual visits. The fence needed paint. Tom noticed that first. Then the clean windows, the swept porch, the row of preserving jars catching morning sun on the sill, everything tended, but nothing fancy. A working woman's house. Tommy pulled at his collar. Tom had made him wash, put on his church shirt, the boy's hair stuck up at the back despite water and combing. "Why are we going here, Pa?" "Business." "What kind?" Tom stopped at the gate. Through the kitchen window, he could see her moving. Black dress, hair pinned tight, the same woman he'd passed at the feed store yesterday, the one who hadn't waved at Tommy. His hand stayed on the gate latch. Martha would have known what to say, how to ask. Martha would have. The door opened. The widow stood in the frame, flour dusting her forearms. She didn't speak, just waited. Tom removed his hat. "Mrs. Tate." A nod. Nothing more. "I need." His mouth went dry. Tommy pressed against his leg. "I need help. Cooking. Paid work." Her eyes moved to Tommy, back to Tom. "I have work. The hotel bread. I know. This would be additional. Morning through supper. The ranch is. I know where the Sullivan Ranch is." The words sat between them like stones. Tom turned his hat in his hands, felt the sweat marks on the band. Through the open door came the smell of baking, not just bread, but something else. Molasses. "Cinnamon. I can pay $1.50 a day." She wiped her hands on her apron, a slow movement that left flour streaks on the dark fabric. "I don't work Sundays." "That's fine. I leave at 7 sharp. Not 7:15, not 7:05, 7. "Understood." Tommy shifted against Tom's leg, his small fingers plucking at his father's pants. The widow's eyes dropped to the boy. Something in her face changed, not softness exactly, but recognition. "You hungry, boy?" Tommy nodded. Sudden and hard, she disappeared inside. Tom heard a chair scrape, a tin lid opening. She returned with something wrapped in brown paper, bent to Tommy's height. Her knees cracked as she lowered herself. "Molasses cookie, still warm." Tommy looked at Tom. Tom nodded. The boy took the cookie with both hands. Careful as holding an egg, the widow stayed crouched, eye level with Tommy. Her sleeve had pulled back. Tom saw the burns on her forearm, old ones, the kind from reaching into ovens year after year. "What's your name?" she asked. "Thomas James Sullivan, ma'am. But everybody calls me Tommy except when I'm in trouble. Then Pa calls me Thomas James." The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "I'm Mrs. Tate. You smell like bread." "Tommy," Tom started. "Most folks do smell like their work," she said, standing, those knees cracked again. "Your pa smells like cattle and leather." Tommy bit into the cookie. Crumbs scattered down his shirt. "My mama smelled like lavender soap." The widow's hands found her apron, smoothed it flat. "That's a good thing to remember." She looked at Tom then, straight on. Her eyes were gray as washwater. "Nobody marries a widow, Mr. Sullivan." The words came flat, matter of fact. But I can cook. I can keep your kitchen and feed your hands. 5:30 arrival, 7 departure, $1.50 a day, Sundays free. Tom's throat worked. That's all I'm asking. Is it? The question hung there. Tommy crunched his cookie. Somewhere a dog barked. The widow waited. Yes, Tom said. That's all? She studied him long enough that sweat started under his collar. Then she turned, walked to her kitchen table. He could see through the door everything in its place. Bowls nested on shelves, knives in a rack, a calendar on the wall with careful pencil marks. She came back with a cloth bundle. Supper, tonight. So you'll know what you're buying. The bundle was warm against his hands, heavier than expected. I don't need. You got 9 hands left, Mr. Sullivan. Maybe 8 by now. They need to eat tonight, or you'll have 7 tomorrow. His face heated. Small town. Everyone knew everyone's business. Start tomorrow, he asked. 5:30? He turned to go, then stopped. The hotel bread. I'll manage both. That's early rising. I don't sleep much. Tommy had chocolate on his chin, his fingers sticky with molasses. He reached out, touched the widow's sleeve where flour dust clung to the black fabric. She didn't pull away. Your hands are like Mama's, the boy said. The widow's face went still as stone. Tom grabbed Tommy's shoulder, steered him toward the gate. Tomorrow, then. Mr. Sullivan. He turned back. Your boy? He been eatin' regular. The question cut clean as a blade. Tom's hand tightened on Tommy's shoulder. We manage. I see. She looked at Tommy once more, then at the bundle in Tom's hands. There's extra in there for breakfast. She closed the door before Tom could respond. Through the window, he watched her return to her bread, hands moving in steady rhythm. Tommy pulled at his sleeve. Pa, what? She got eyes like you. And Tom shifted the bundle, felt something leak through the cloth. Warm, gravy maybe. His stomach clenched hard enough to hurt. Tomorrow she'd be in Martha's kitchen. Elizabeth's boots knew every stone between town and the Sullivan Ranch. 6 weeks of walking the same path before dawn, the dinner pail's weight pulling her shoulder down, the October cold working through her shawl. The stars were fading. Soon November would push sunrise later, make the walk darker. She shifted the pail to her other hand. Inside biscuits for the hand's breakfast, salt pork for noon beans, dried apples for pie. Her own breakfast, a heel of bread, sat heavy in her stomach. The ranch gate appeared in the gray light. Tommy stood there with the lantern, same as every morning for 3 weeks now. The boy never missed, even when frost skinned the ground. Morning, Mrs. Tate? Morning, Tommy. He fell into step beside her, lantern swinging. His nightshirt hung below his coat, bare feet in 2 large boots. She kept her eyes forward. I already got the stove hot. That's helpful. Use the kindling you split yesterday. She'd been splitting their wood for 2 weeks now. Tom Sullivan hadn't asked her to. She'd just seen the dull axe, the scattered pile, started setting things right. The way she did with the mending that appeared in her basket shirts with missing buttons, tears in the ranch hand's work pants, never asked, never mentioned, just fixed and returned. The kitchen door stood open. She hung her shawl on the empty peg beside the door. Martha Sullivan's apron still hung on the next peg over. Blue flowers faded, but clean. Elizabeth never touched it. The stove was hot like Tommy promised, but the damper was wrong. Smoke leaked from the joints. She adjusted it, checked the firebox. The boy had used too much wood. She'd teach him proper measuring tomorrow. Or not. Teaching him things would seem like overstepping. She tied her work apron over her black dress. The kitchen took shape in the lamplight, her organized shelves, her labeled preserves in the pantry, her system for the dishes. 6 weeks of careful arrangement. Tom Sullivan never commented on the changes, just used them, learned where she kept things, adapted. Tommy climbed onto his usual stool by the work table. "What's for breakfast?" "Biscuits and gravy, eggs. The hands like your eggs better than Pa's." She cracked 2 dozen into the big skillet. The whites spread and bubbled. Tommy watched her every movement, the way children watch when they're memorizing. "You want to learn?" His head bobbed fast. She handed him the salt box. 3 pinches, spread wide. His small fingers worked over the pan. Too much in one spot, nothing in another. She didn't correct him. Bootsteps on the porch, Jake Harris first, always. Then Reed and Patterson and the others, filing in with hat brims dripping dew. Fade is still creased from sleep. 9 hands now. Tom had hired 2 more last week, once word spread about regular meals. "Morning, Mrs. Tate." She nodded, spooning eggs onto plates. The men took their seats, same spots every morning. Unspoken arrangement, she moved between them, coffee pot in one hand, platter in the other. When she served, they removed their hats. When she stepped back, they put them on again. A rhythm established without discussion. Tom entered last, always. He took coffee black, 2 biscuits, no gravy, sat at the table's head, but kept his eyes on his plate. They'd developed a system of not looking. She'd serve, he'd eat, he'd leave for the range, she'd clean. Noon he'd return, they'd pass at the door. Evening the same. 6 weeks of careful distance. "Fence needs checking at Cooper's Creek," Tom told the men. "Harris, take 3. Rest with me on the north pasture." The hands shoveled food, gulped coffee. Elizabeth refilled cups without being asked. Her sleeve brushed Harris's shoulder. He shifted away. Polite. They all did that treated her like glass, like something that might break if handled rough. Except Tommy. The boy pressed against her skirt whenever she passed. Casual as a cat, she'd stop stepping away after the 2nd week. The men filed out, boots thundering. Tom last, pausing at the door. "The washing? Done, drying in the back room." "I didn't ask." "Needed doing." He looked at her then, quick and sharp. She kept her hands busy clearing plates. The door closed. Tommy stayed on his stool. "You eat now." "Later." "Pa says you should eat with us." "Your pa says lots of things." She scraped plates into the slop bucket for the hogs. Good food left. These men ate better now. Left less. Through the window, she watched them mounting horses, checking rifles, coiling ropes. Tom's broad back bent as he adjusted his saddle, his shirt pulled tight across his shoulders. The 3rd one she'd mended. He favored his right side when mounting. Tore the same seam every time. "Why don't you eat with us?" Tommy again, persistent as a horsefly. She turned from the window. "Some things aren't proper." "Why?" "They just aren't. But you're hungry. I can hear your stomach." She handed him a dish towel. "Dry." They worked in silence. Elizabeth washed, Tommy dried, both standing at the big basin. His head reached her elbow. Martha's son, but nothing of her in his face. All Tom, the strong jaw, the stubborn mouth, the eyes that looked too hard at things. Noon came fast. Beans with salt pork, cornbread, pickled beets. The men ate like wolves. Tom counted heads, frowned. "Where's Patterson?" "Went to town," Harris said. "Doctor?" "He's sick. Cut on his hand went bad. From that barbed wire last week." Elizabeth looked at Patterson's usual chair. She'd noticed him favoring the hand, seen the red streak starting up his arm yesterday. Should have said something, but speaking up about personal things wasn't her place. She served apple pie. The men went quiet when they ate her pies, almost reverent. Even Tom's face changed, something soft creeping in around his eyes. "Mrs. Tate." Harris cleared his throat. "That shirt you fixed, the blue one, I ought to pay. No need. But the thread? No need. Harris ducked his head, color rising in his weathered cheeks. They all did this dance wanting to pay, not knowing how to insist. She never let them. Taking money for mending would change things, make it business instead of whatever this was. 3 o'clock, 4, 5. Supper preparations? Beef stew today, with carrots from her garden. She'd brought them this morning, added to the dinner pail without mentioning it. The meat was tough. Tom bought cheap cuts. She'd learned to cook it slow, make it tender. Tommy helped set the table. He knew her system, now forks left, knives right, cups at 2 o'clock, proper table setting in a ranch kitchen. She wondered what Martha would think. The men returned as the sun dropped, dusty, tired, smelling of cattle and sweat. They washed at the pump outside, came in damp and hungry. Same seats, same rhythm. She served. They ate. Good stew, Mrs. Tate. Thank you, Mr. Reed. She never ate with them, never would. But sometimes, like now, when the lamplight caught their faces and Tommy laughed at something Harris said, she let herself imagine it, sitting, belonging, being more than the woman who cooked, 7 o'clock sharp. She untied her apron, hung it on its peg, retrieved her shawl. The dinner pail waited by the door, empty now, ready for tomorrow's journey. I'll walk you, Tom said. Same offer, every night. No need. Same answer. Tommy ran over, pressed something into her hand. A marble, blue glass with white swirls. Found it. Thought you'd like it. She closed her fingers around it, warm from his pocket. Thank you. Outside, full dark had settled. She'd walk home alone, eat alone, sleep alone. Tomorrow she'd walk back, cook again, leave again. The pattern set and solid. But tonight something was different. Through the kitchen window, she saw Tom standing at the stove, looking at the empty place where she'd stood. His hand reached out, stopped just short of her apron on its peg. Then he touched it, just the edge, like touching something that might burn. The usher's hand stayed firm on Elizabeth's elbow, guiding her past her usual pew, 3rd row from back where she'd sat for 2 years, past it to the 5th row, then the 7th. His fingers pressed harder when she slowed. This'll do fine, Mrs. Tate. The last pew, where the traveling salesman sat, where the drunk cowboys slouched on Easter. Her gloved fingers gripped the worn wood, the church filled behind her rustling skirts and clearing throats, hymnals dropping onto laps. Every sound seemed to echo off her back. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried from 4 rows up. Only proper. Can't have certain situations confusing the children. Elizabeth opened her hymnal. Page 247. Rock of Ages. The pages shook. She pressed them flat. Tommy's voice pierced through the organ's wheeze. Mrs. Tate, Mrs. Tate. She didn't turn? Couldn't. The congregation's heads swiveled like weather vanes in a shifting wind. The organ stopped. Small boots ran down the aisle. Tommy appeared at her pew's edge, his Sunday suit too short in the arms, his cowlick defying pomade. You're in the wrong place. Every eye in the church fixed on them. Elizabeth's throat closed. Tom Sullivan's heavy steps followed. His hand landed on Tommy's shoulder. Come on, son. But she sits up there, Tommy pointed. With us. Not today. Why? Tom's jaw worked. His eyes met Elizabeth's for half a heartbeat. Something raw there, quickly shuddered. Come on. He hauled Tommy away. The boy's protests carried back. But she makes our breakfast. She fixes our clothes. The organ resumed. Reverend Michaels climbed to the pulpit. Elizabeth stared at the hymnal's blurred words. Her voice wouldn't come for the singing. Behind her, someone whispered. Ahead, Mrs. Patterson's shoulders stayed rigid as fence posts. The sermon floated past something about charity, about helping widows and orphans. The irony burned. When the collection plate passed, Elizabeth dropped her coins without looking up. Service ended. She stayed seated while others filed out, their skirts brushing her knees, their whispers following like smoke. Only when the church emptied did she stand. Pastor's wife waited at the door, Mrs. Michaels, 60 and silver-haired, with the hands that had delivered half the county's babies. Elizabeth, Mrs. Michaels. The older woman's eyes held steady. Tea, Tuesday, 2:00. Not a question. Elizabeth nodded. Outside, the families clustered in the churchyard. Children played tag between the gravestones. Women gathered under the oak tree, their voices carrying clear. And living in sin, practically. What kind of example? That poor little boy, growing attached. Elizabeth walked through them, back straight, eyes forward. Her boots hit the boardwalk hard enough to jar her teeth. At the corner, movement caught her eye. Tom Sullivan stood by his wagon, Tommy already in the bed. Their eyes met across the dusty street. He touched his hat brim. Small gesture, huge risk. She walked on. Tuesday came gray and cold. The ladies' aid meeting in the church basement meant walking past the quilting frame, past the mission boxes, past 8 women who'd known her since she'd arrived as Sam Tate's bride 4 years ago. Mrs. Henderson stood as Elizabeth entered. "Mrs. Tate, we need to discuss your situation." Elizabeth set down her sewing basket. "My employment, your daily presence at the Sullivan Ranch." Mrs. Henderson's thin fingers worried her brooch. "Unchaperoned, with a widowed man, it's causing talk. I cook, I clean, I leave. You're there dawn to dusk." Mrs. Patterson leaned forward. "People have noticed. People always notice. This is different." Mrs. Henderson's voice sharpened. "You're creating scandal. That boy follows you like you're his mother." The word hit like cold water. Elizabeth's needle slipped, pricked her thumb. Blood beaded. "I'm his cook. You're confusing him. And frankly, you're putting Mr. Sullivan in a compromising position. A man of his standing. Elizabeth sucked her bleeding thumb. "You mean his ranch, his cattle, his dead wife's money." Silence dropped like a stone. Mrs. Daniels, the feed store owner's wife, shifted in her chair. "There are proper governesses from Denver, educated women who wouldn't last a week." Elizabeth stood. "Who couldn't cook for 12 hungry men, stretch cheap meat into filling meals, mend clothes by lamplight, teach a boy gentle ways while his father rebuilds his life. You're too familiar with them." Mrs. Henderson's face had gone pink. "It's unseemly. Unseemly as a child eating burnt porridge. Unseemly as good men leaving because they can't work hungry. Unseemly is a widow acting above her station." Mrs. Patterson's words came out crisp as fresh bills. "You've forgotten your place. Mrs. Tate." Elizabeth gathered her sewing. Her thumb still bled, spotted the white fabric. "I know exactly where my place is. 5:30 every morning, 7 every evening. In between, I make sure people eat." She walked to the door, stopped. "Mrs. Henderson, your husband bought diseased cattle last spring from that Denver seller. Lost $400. Mr. Sullivan warned him, but he didn't listen because Tom Sullivan doesn't wear fine suits or speak proper grammar." Mrs. Henderson's mouth opened, closed. "Mrs. Patterson, your son James has been sneaking whiskey from your husband's store. Everyone knows but you." Mrs. Patterson went white. "Mrs. Daniels, that governess you mentioned, she left Denver because she was carrying a married man's child." The room seemed to shrink. "I cook, I clean, I keep my eyes open and my mouth shut, usually." Elizabeth pulled on her gloves. "Good afternoon." She climbed the stairs into weak sunlight. Her hands shook as she walked behind the church. The cemetery spread quiet and still. Sam Stone stood modest in the back row. She stopped there, pressed her palm against the cold granite. "I'm trying, Sam, but they won't let me be." Wind stirred the dead grass. Somewhere a crow called. The feed store door slammed. Elizabeth looked up. Tom Sullivan strode out, his face dark as thunder. Mr. Daniels followed, still talking. Tom turned, said something low and fierce. Daniels stepped back. Tom's eyes found her across the cemetery fence. He started toward her, then stopped, looked at the headstones between them, at the watching windows of Main Street. He turned away. That evening, Elizabeth knelt by her bed. The words wouldn't come proper, just fragments. "Help me endure. Help the boy. Help his father. Help me know when to leave." Through her window, she could see the Sullivan Ranch in the distance. Lamplight in the kitchen window. Were they eating the stew she'd left? Was Tommy asking where she sat? Was Tom touching her apron again? Thunder rolled in from the west. By morning, there'd be rain. The walk would be muddy. She'd need to leave earlier, arrive clean and proper. She stood, knees aching, and noticed something on her doorstep. A package wrapped in brown paper. No note inside. A length of good wool fabric, black, but finer than anything she owned. Enough for a new dress. At the bottom, wrapped separate, a smaller bundle. She opened it. A pair of ladies' work gloves, leather, well made, the kind that would protect hands from burns, from knife cuts, from the daily wounds of kitchen work. They fit perfectly. She looked toward the ranch again. The kitchen light had gone out, but in an upstairs window, Tom's window, a shadow stood watching. Lightning flashed. In that brief illumination, she saw him clear, just standing, looking toward town, toward her. The storm was coming fast. Tomorrow would bring mud and difficulty, but also something else. Tomorrow was Wednesday, the day Tom usually went to the bank, the day he'd be in town when she walked to the ranch, the day they might meet on the road, alone, with things that needed saying. October's harvest moon hung fat and orange when the first wagon rolled into the Sullivan Ranch. Elizabeth heard it from the kitchen wheels grinding, men's voices carrying across the dawn air. She counted by sound 4 wagons, maybe 20 men. Tom hadn't warned her. She stood at the stove. Yesterday's bean pot still soaking, today's bread half mixed. Through the window, lanterns bobbed like fireflies, men unloading bedrolls, gear, tools, harvest crew from neighboring counties come for the wheat. The kitchen door banged open. Tom filled the frame, chest heaving like he'd run from the barn. "I forgot to tell you, 20 men. Her hands kept working the dough, had to keep working or they'd shake. 22. His boots scraped the floor. "I can send them to town for meals." "With what money?" Silence. She knew his books as well as he did now. Every dollar planned, every cent allocated. Feeding a harvest crew meant the difference between profit and ruin. "I'll manage." She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving flour streaks. "But I need supplies, now." "Make a list. 50 pounds of flour, 20 of sugar, salt pork all Hendricks has, coffee, lard, potatoes from the root cellar." She turned to face him. "And Tommy helps. No school this week." Elizabeth. Her name. He never used her name. The sound of it stopped them both. "Mrs. Tate," he corrected, color rising in his neck. "That's too much." "It's what's needed." The harvest crew's voices grew louder, hungry men waiting. Tom's jaw worked the way it did when calculating costs. "Take the wagon. Take Tommy. Get what you need." She was already untying her apron, reaching for her shawl. "Send Harris to help load. Tell the men breakfast in 1 hour." 1 hour for 22. I said, "I'll manage." Tommy appeared in his nightshirt, rubbing his eyes. What's happening? Harvest. Elizabeth pulled him toward the stairs. Get dressed. You're helping? The general store was just opening when they arrived. Mrs. Hendricks's eyes widened at Elizabeth's list. This is half my stock. The Sullivan Ranch will pay. Elizabeth started pulling items from shelves. End of harvest. But Mrs. Hendricks. Elizabeth turned, arms full of coffee tins. 22 men need feeding for a week. You want that business, or should I try Carson's store in Millfield? Tommy struggled with a flour sack. Harris lifted it easy, carried it to the wagon. The pile grew beans, molasses, cornmeal, 3 whole hams from the smoke room. That's $47, Mrs. Hendricks said, pencil trembling. Put it on the Sullivan account. Back at the ranch, the crew had gathered in the yard. Rough men, sun-dark and lean, rolling cigarettes and telling stories. They watched her unload, their eyes following the supplies. Ma'am? An older man, gray-bearded and bent, touched his hat. We appreciate a good cook. She nodded, kept moving, into the kitchen, Tommy trailing. No time for talk. She had promises to keep. The next hour blurred. Biscuit dough slammed and rolled. Coffee boiled in 3 pots toms, plus 2 borrowed from somewhere. Bacon sizzled in every pan she could find. Tommy cracked eggs until his small fingers cramped. She took over, cracking 4 at a time, shells flying. Set plates, she told Tommy. Every flat surface. The boy ran, placing tin plates on the table, the counters, the windowsills. Elizabeth sliced bread with mechanical precision. Her shoulders burned. Sweat ran down her spine, soaking her corset. Ready? Tom stood in the doorway. Send them in, 6 at a time. They came in waves. Dirty hands washed at the pump, hats removed at the door. They ate standing, plates balanced, coffee steaming. She kept cooking as they ate. Rivers of eggs, mountains of biscuits. Tommy poured coffee. His tongue stuck out in concentration. Best breakfast I've had since Missouri, one man said. Better than my wife's, said another, then looked guilty. Don't tell her. By the 6th wave, Elizabeth's legs shook. She gripped the stove's edge, kept frying. The gray-bearded man, last to eat, watched her. You ain't eatin'. Later. You'll fall down. I won't. He studied her, then pulled a flask from his coat, poured something into a cup, added coffee. Drink. She smelled whiskey, shook her head. Just coffee with medicine for strength. She took a sip. Heat spread through her chest, down to her trembling legs. The man winked, shuffled out. Noon meant dinner, real food. She had beans soaking, salt pork rendering. Tommy peeled potatoes until his hands went red. 30 pounds of potatoes. Her knife moved in rhythm, peel, turn, drop, peel to turn to drop. Tom came in for water, stopped when he saw them. Tommy at the table, surrounded by potato skins. Elizabeth at the stove, 3 pots boiling, sweat plastering her hair to her neck. You need help. I have help. She nodded at Tommy. Real help. Tommy's real. The boy straightened, proud. Tom grabbed a knife, sat beside his son, started peeling. His hands, made for reins and ropes, fumbled with the small blade. Tommy showed him the motion. Together they worked, father and son and the woman who was neither wife nor mother. The crew ate dinner in shifts again. Beans and salt pork, potatoes mashed with butter she'd been saving, cornbread with the last of her sorghum syrup. They ate like starved dogs, then went back to the fields. Supper would be the test. She started it while they were still eating dinner. Beef stew Tim had butchered a steer that morning. She cut meat until her fingers went numb. Tommy washed dishes. His hands had gone soft from so much water, started bleeding at the knuckles. Enough, she told him. Rest. I can help. You have helped. He curled in the corner by the warmth, asleep in minutes. Like a puppy, she thought. Then stopped that thought. Not hers to think. 4 o'clock. 5, 6. The stew simmered. She'd made 3 pots full. Had to be enough. Her back screamed when she bent to check the oven. Apple pies, 6 of them, using fruit she'd dried last month. The crew would want sweet after days of trail food. She walked to the root cellar while the pies baked. Her legs barely held on the stairs. In the corner, she'd been storing things. 20 jars of preserves labeled in her neat hand. Plum, August. Tomato, September. Apple butter, October. All from her garden, her trees, her time, for this ranch, for winter, for them. Footsteps above. She climbed up. Tom stood in the kitchen, looking at the organized chaos. Tommy still slept in the corner. The pies leaked juice, filling the air with cinnamon. "The men want to thank you." "No need." "Elizabeth," her name again, softer now. "You're saving us." She turned away, checked the stew. Her vision swam. When had she last eaten? "This morning, yesterday, the preserves," he said. "In the cellar." She kept stirring. "You did that, without asking, without pay." "Waste bothers me." "That's not why." The spoon trembled in her hand. Tom stepped closer. She felt his warmth at her back, not touching, just there. "I'll pay you for them." "No." "They're yours. Your fruit, your labor." "No." She turned, had to grip the stove to stay upright. There for winter, for Tommy, for... The room tilted key. Tom's hands caught her arms, steadied her. Rough palms through thin sleeves. "When did you last eat?" "I'm fine." "When?" She couldn't remember. His hands stayed on her arms. Tommy stirred in the corner but didn't wake. "Sit." Tom guided her to a chair. "Just sit." He filled a plate, stew, bread, a slice of pie, set it before her. "Eat." "The crew can wait 5 minutes." She ate. First bite made her stomach cramp. Second went down easier. Tom watched, arms crossed. Through the window, the harvest crew gathered, waiting for supper. But he didn't move. "The gloves," she said between bites. "They fit." Janala touched his cheeks. "Good." "The fabric, too? It's too fine. It's practical. Good wool lasts." She scraped the plate clean. He took it, filled it again. She ate that, too. The crew came in for supper loud and grateful. They'd made good progress. Someone said another 3 days and the wheat would be in. Money in the bank, security for winter. Elizabeth served and cleared and served again. Tommy woke, helped without being asked. The gray-bearded man slipped her another medicinal coffee. Tom kept watching from his place at the table's head. Full dark when the last man finished. Elizabeth washed dishes by lamplight, Tommy drying beside her. The boy swayed on his feet. "Bed," Tom said, lifting his son. "Mrs. Tate, leave the rest. Almost done." He carried Tommy upstairs. Elizabeth finished the dishes, cleaned the stove, set beans to soak for tomorrow. Her body moved without her mind's permission, following patterns worn into her bones. She checked the kitchen once more, ready for tomorrow's battle. Then she reached for her shawl, found it missing. On the peg, where it should hang, Tom had left an envelope. Inside, $15. The tears came sudden and hard. She pressed her apron to her face, muffling the sound. $15? More than a month's wages. For preserves she'd made from love, not duty. He didn't understand. The preserves weren't about money. Or maybe he did understand. Maybe that's exactly why he'd paid. She found her shawl on the floor where it had fallen, wrapped it tight, stepped onto the porch. Tom sat there in the dark, a shadow against shadows. "I'll walk you home. It's not proper. Nothing about this week will be proper." He stood, and in the moonlight she saw exhaustion carved into his face. They'd both been breaking themselves for this harvest. "Tomorrow will be harder," he said. "I know. I could hire help, from town, for you. They wouldn't come. He knew it was true. The proper women wouldn't work beside her. Then we'll manage, he said, like today. We? The word hung between them like a promise neither could make. The first drops hit the kitchen window. As Elizabeth hung the last pot, November rain, cold and hard. She'd stayed too late, past 7, past 8. The harvest crew had celebrated their last day with whiskey. Tom had let them, then dealt with the mess. Spilled food, broken chair, one man vomiting behind the barn. Thunder rolled across the prairie. Elizabeth reached for her shawl. No. Tom stood in the doorway, hair wet from checking the livestock. You can't walk in this. I've walked in worse. Lightning flashed. The window rattled. In that white moment, she saw the road already running with water, turning to mud. You haven't... He stepped inside, dripping on the clean floor. This is different. She knew he was right. November storms were meaner than summer ones. Colder. Sideways rain that cut through wool. She'd be soaked in minutes, chilled to the bone before she reached town. I'll take the wagon, she said. Road's washing out. Saw it when I brought the horses in. They stood there, rain hammering the roof. Tommy appeared on the stairs in his nightshirt, bare feet pale in the lamplight. Is Mrs. Tate staying? The question hung there. Elizabeth's fingers found her apron ties, twisted them, just until the storm passes. Tom said, It won't pass tonight. Tommy came down 2 more steps. These storms last. Mama always said November storms got 3 days of muck in them. Martha's name in the room changed something. Tom's shoulders tightened. Elizabeth looked at the black window, rain streaming down like tears. The guest room, Tom said. It's ready. The guest room, Martha's sewing room. Elizabeth had cleaned it weekly, but never lingered. Martha's things still filled it: embroidery hoops, fabric squares, a half-finished quilt. I can sleep in the kitchen, by the stove. No! Thunder crashed. Tommy ran down the remaining stairs, pressed against Elizabeth's skirt. His small body shook. I don't like storms. Her hand found his head without thinking. They're just noise. Mama said that too. Tom turned away. I'll get the room ready. He climbed the stairs, heavy-footed. Elizabeth felt Tommy's trembling through her skirt. The boy's fear was real, animal deep. She'd seen it in colts during storms, that bone-deep terror of sky-breaking sounds. Want to help me? She asked. With what? Tomorrow's bread. We can start it now. His head lifted. Now. But it's night time. Best time for bread. It rises while we sleep. She led him to the work table. His trembling eased as she showed him the measurements. 1 cup, 2. Hands busy, mind occupied. The storm became background noise. Tom's footsteps above them. Drawers opening, closing. The sound of sheets snapping. He was changing the bedding. After all these months. Changing Martha's preserved room. Why does bread rise? Tommy asked. Yeast. Little invisible creatures that eat sugar and make air. Creatures. His eyes went wide, like fairies. Sure, bread fairies. He smiled, first real smile she'd seen during a storm. They worked the dough together, his small hands beside hers in the sticky mass. Your hands know things, Tommy said. What things? How to make scared go away. Her throat tightened. She kept kneading, showing him the rhythm. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. Tom returned. His shirt was damp with sweat despite the cold. Room's ready. She covered the dough with a clean cloth. This needs to rise overnight. I know. He watched her wash her hands, dry them on the towel. I remember. Remember what Martha making bread, the rhythm of a house with a woman in it? She didn't ask. Tommy tugged her skirt. "Will you tuck me in?" Tom started. "Please." Elizabeth looked at Tom. He nodded once, sharp. She followed Tommy upstairs. His room was small, neat, a carved wooden horse on the dresser, picture of Martha on the wall, young and smiling. Tommy climbed into bed, pulled the quilts to his chin. Mama used to sing during storms. Elizabeth sat on the bed's edge. The mattress dipped. What did she sing? Amazing Grace. But I liked when she hummed better. Elizabeth hummed, no words, just melody. Tommy's eyes grew heavy. Thunder rolled again, but he didn't flinch. Her hand smoothed his hair, found the same cowlick that never would lay flat. In the doorway, a shadow, Tom, watching. She kept humming, kept smoothing Tommy's hair. The boy's breathing deepened. Asleep. She stood careful, not to wake him. Tom stepped back. Let her pass. In the hallway, they faced each other. Lightning lit his face, raw, uncertain. "The room?" he said. "Last door?" She knew which door. Had cleaned behind it dozens of times. But entering at night, to sleep, was different. The room smelled of lavender. Martha's sachets still in the drawers. The bed was made with fresh sheets, but everything else remained untouched. Sewing basket by the chair, reading glasses on the side table, like Martha had just stepped out. Elizabeth sat on the bed's edge. The storm raged. Through the wall, she heard Tom's footsteps, pacing, back and forth, back and forth. She unpinned her hair. It fell past her shoulders, still damp with kitchen steam. No brush here, she finger-combed it, working out the knots. Her reflection in the window was ghostly, unfamiliar. When had she last seen herself with her hair down? Thunder crashed, terrible and close. A cry from Tommy's room. She ran, bare feet on cold floor. Tommy sat up in bed, sobbing. Tom already there, awkward, patting the boy's shoulder. "It's breaking. The sky's breaking." Elizabeth pushed past Tom, gathered Tommy against her. The boy clung, fingers digging into her arms. "Shh, just noise, just noise." Tom stepped back. She felt him watching as she rocked his son, hummed against his hair. Tommy's sobs slowed. "Stay," the boy whispered. "Please, stay." She looked at Tom. He nodded, left the room. She lay beside Tommy on top of the quilts. The boy curled against her, his breath warm on her neck, her hair spread across his pillow. When had someone last needed her this way? Not for cooking or cleaning, but for comfort. Thunder rolled. Tommy burrowed closer. "Tell me about bread fairies." She spun stories in the dark. Fairies that lived in flour sacks, that danced in rising dough, that painted golden crusts with tiny brushes. Tommy's breathing steadied. The door creaked. Tom stood there with a lamp, watching them. His son wrapped around a woman who wasn't his mother. Elizabeth's hair, loose like a wife's would be. The sight of it froze them both. He stopped, set the lamp on the dresser, in case you need light. He left. Elizabeth stayed still. Tommy warm against her side. Through the window, lightning illuminated the ranch, the barn, the smokehouse, the garden plot she'd been preparing for spring, for vegetables she might not plant, for a future she couldn't claim. Sleep wouldn't come. She counted Tommy's breaths, listened to the storm weakening. Dawn came gray and reluctant. Tommy stirred, opened his eyes, found her still there. "You stayed." "I stayed." Footsteps in the hall. Tom, trying to be quiet. The smell of coffee drifted up. He'd started breakfast. Elizabeth slipped from the bed, pinned her hair, quick and messy. Tommy watched from his quilts. "You look different with your hair down. Everyone looks different in the morning. You look like a mama." The words hit her chest like cold water. She turned away, smoothing her wrinkled dress. Downstairs, Tom had eggs frying, coffee boiling. He didn't look at her. "Road's still out." She moved to the stove, took over the eggs without asking. He stepped aside. They worked in silence, her cooking, him setting places, Tommy watching from the stairs. Breakfast was quiet. The storm had passed, but left damage she could see through the window. Fence down, barn door hanging loose. "I'll need to go to town," Tom said. "Get supplies for repairs. The road, I'll ride. Horse can manage what wagon can't." He looked at her then, direct, purposeful. "You'll stay until I get back." Not a question. "The bread needs baking anyway," she said. "Yes." He stood, reached for his coat. The bread. But they both knew it wasn't about bread. Something had shifted in the storm. Lines crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. He stopped at the door. That guest room, it shouldn't be a shrine. Tom. His name. She'd never said his name. It stopped him cold. "It's been 6 months," he said to the door. "Martha wouldn't want—" He stopped. "When I get back, we need to talk." He left. Elizabeth stood at the window, watched him saddle his horse, ride toward town. Tommy pressed against her side. "Are you staying forever now?" She looked down at him, his mother's eyes in his father's face, hoping for something she couldn't promise. "Let's bake that bread." But her hand shook as she uncovered the dough, because Tuck was right. They did need to talk. About lines crossed and futures uncertain, about wanting things that weren't proper to want. Tom's pen scratched across the ledger. The only sound in the pre-dawn kitchen. November's accounts. Harvest income, $320. Expenses, seed, labor, repairs. The widow's wages. He stopped at that line. $45 monthly, plus the $15 he'd paid for preserves, plus the fabric and gloves. The numbers told a story he hadn't wanted to read. In 6 months, she'd saved him more than she cost. Ranch hands stayed now. Work got done. Tommy smiled. "Tommy." The boy's voice drifted down from upstairs, singing something about bread fairies. That storm 2 weeks back had changed things. The widow Elizabeth had stayed 3 nights until the road dried. 3 nights of her hair pinned proper again, keeping careful distance. But something had shifted. The way Tommy reached for her hand, the way she let him. Tommy stood on the stairs, dressed but shirt buttoned wrong. "Come here." Tom fixed the buttons. The boy's fingers were still too small for the task, though he tried. Martha would have sewn bigger buttons, made it easier. Martha would have. Why doesn't Mrs. Tate live here? The question hung in the cold air. Tom's fingers stilled on the last button. She has her own house, but she's here more than there. That's her job. Mr. Harris lives in the bunkhouse. For his job, that's different. Why? Because she's a woman. Because people would talk more than they already do. Because I watch her hands when she cooks and wonder what they'd feel like not covered in flour. Just dear. Tommy's face scrunched, the expression he got when working through hard arithmetic. If she lived here, she could make breakfast earlier and stay for supper and be here during storms. Each word a small hammer against Tom's resolve. "Go feed the chickens." Tommy grabbed his coat, ran out. Tom returned to the ledger, but the numbers swam. He closed it, walked to the window. Elizabeth would arrive soon, walking that dirt road in the dark, dinner pail pulling her shoulder down, 6 months of watching her walk away. He climbed the stairs to his room. In the bottom drawer of his dresser, wrapped in cloth, lay Martha's things, her brush, her Sunday pins, the daguerreotype from their wedding, and at the bottom her garden gloves, good leather, barely worn. Martha had bought them the week before she took sick, planning for spring planting that never came. Tom held them. They still smelled faintly of lavender from her drawer sachets. Outside, the gate creaked. Elizabeth arriving, always exactly 5:30. He washed his face, combed his hair, used pomade. though it felt foolish, checked his reflection. The man looking back seemed older than his 34 years, sun lines and grief lines carved deep. Downstairs, Elizabeth had already started, but coffee brewing, biscuit dough rising. She worked without speaking, efficient as always. But there were new things now. A second apron hanging beside hers, Tommy's, child-sized, that she'd made from scraps. Her preserves filling the pantry shelves. Small changes that added up to something larger. "I'm going out," he said. She nodded, not looking up from her mixing. He walked to the cemetery on the hill. Martha's stone stood simple and clean. He'd paid extra for the rose carved at the top. She'd loved roses, though they never grew well here. Tommy asked why she doesn't live with us. Wind through dry grass was the only answer. "I know what you'd say, that the boy needs a mother. That I need—" He stopped. What did he need? Not a replacement for Martha. Nobody could be that, but maybe something else. Someone else. I'm going to ask her, not for love, for partnership, for Tommy, for the ranch. He touched the stone, for life to continue. Walking back, he saw her in the garden plot, kneeling in the dirt. November wasn't planting time, but she was working the soil, preparing, always preparing for a future she might not see. His shadow fell across her. She looked up, dirt on her cheeks. "Ground's workable after the rain. You planting spring crops?" Her hand stilled. "Someone should." He pulled out the gloves, Martha's gloves, extended them. "These should be used, not preserved." Elizabeth stared at them. Leather fingers curled slightly, shaped by Martha's hands. "I can't." "They're good gloves. Shame to waste them. They're hers, were hers." He set them in Elizabeth's lap. Everything here was hers. House, garden, kitchen. But she's gone, and things need using. Elizabeth's fingers traced the leather. Dirt from her hands left marks. "Why are you doing this?" Tom dropped to one knee, not romantic-like, just practical, to be eye level. "I need to say something, ask something." She went still as a spooked deer. "I'm not asking for love." The words came out rough. "Not asking you to replace her or pretend feelings that aren't there, but I'm asking for life, for partnership, for you to stay." Her eyes stayed on the gloves. "As your cook, as my wife." There, said, the word hung between them like a blade. "Mr. Sullivan." "Tom." "Mr. Sullivan. Firm, proper. I know what I'm worth. $1.50 a day. Good cooking, clean house. That's what I'm worth to you." "No." She looked up then, gray eyes sharp as winter. "I know what I'm worth," she repeated, harder now. "A widow with no children, no property, no family. Used goods, as Mrs. Henderson kindly reminded me, worth charity work in back pews and whispers behind hands. That's not. I buried a husband, Mr. Sullivan, watched him cough blood for 3 months, sold everything to pay the doctor who couldn't save him. Came here with nothing but black dresses and recipes. I know exactly what I'm worth to this town." Tom's knee pressed into the cold dirt. A rock dug into his shin, but he didn't move. "So do I, ma'am." His voice came out quiet. "Finally, so do I." She blinked. Worth Tommy singing again? Worth ranch hands staying? Worth preserves made without asking because you saw need? Worth splitting our wood and mending our clothes and making this house breathe again? His hand reached out, stopped just short of hers. "Worth walking you home every night, but not doing it because it wouldn't be proper. Worth watching you with my son and seeing him heal. Worth more than wages. Worth a name and a place and a right to stay." Elizabeth's fingers tightened on the gloves. "People will say you're settling, taking the convenient choice. Let them. They'll say I trapped you, worked my way in through your boy. Let them say that too. She stood, dirt cascading from her skirt. Tom rose with her. The noon sun caught the silver threads in her black dress, the ones from too much washing. I need time. How much? 3 days? Same as she'd said in the outline, same as a resurrection, same as bread rising twice and baking once. 3 days. She walked toward the house, still carrying Martha's gloves. At the door she turned. That first morning, when you came to hire me, you touched my hand when we shook. Your wife's ring caught my palm, cut it a little. Tom looked at his hand, the gold band Martha had placed there 8 years ago. It healed, Elizabeth said. The cut, but I felt it for weeks, like a reminder. Of what? That some things mark us even after they're gone. She went inside. Through the window, he watched her return to cooking. Tommy helped, chattering about something. Her hand touched his head, gentle, automatic. 3 days. Tom walked to the barn, found work for his hands. But his mind stayed on her words. Some things mark us. Yes, Martha had marked him. Sam Tate had marked Elizabeth. But maybe there was room for new marks, different ones. He looked at his wedding ring, the gold worn thin from years of work. 3 days to decide if he could remove it. 3 days for her to decide if she could watch him do it. 3 days for Tommy to not know his whole life hung in the balance. The ring turned on his finger, loose now. He'd lost weight since Martha. Everything hung looser, clothes, skin, the very shape of his life. Maybe it was time to be filled in again. Different, not better or worse, just different. 3 days. But when he looked through the barn door, he saw Elizabeth teaching Tommy to braid bread, their heads bent together, her black dress and his small hands working the dough. Like a picture, like a future, like something that had already been decided, just waiting for the words to catch up. The third dawn came gray and still. Tom stood at the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in his hands. The road stretched empty. Tommy sat at the table, dressed in his church clothes without being told. The boy hadn't asked about the 3 days, but he knew. Children always knew when grown folks were deciding things. She's not coming, Tommy said. Tom's chest tightened. 5:30, 5:40 now. She'd never been late, not once in 6 months. Maybe she's... The gate creaked. Elizabeth stood there with a small trunk, not her dinner pail, a trunk, worn leather with brass corners, the kind that held everything a person owned. Tom's coffee cup hit the floor. Brown liquid spread across the boards. Tommy ran past him, out the door, down the path. Mrs. Tate, Mrs. Tate. She set down the trunk, caught Tommy as he crashed into her skirts. The boy's arms wrapped around her waist, his face pressed into her stomach. You brought your things. I did. All of them. All that matter. Tom reached them, stopped 3 feet away. Elizabeth's eyes met his over Tommy's head. She wore a different dress, still black, but newer, the fabric he'd bought her. Come to stay, she said, if you'll have me. Tom's throat closed. He nodded. She untangled from Tommy, picked up her trunk, light enough to carry one-handed, everything she owned in one small box. Where? Tom started, then stopped. Where would she sleep? The guest room, still full of Martha's sewing. His room, the kitchen. We'll need the pastor, Elizabeth said, practical as discussing groceries. Today, if possible. Today. No sense waiting, unless you've changed your mind. No. The word came out too fast, too hard. No, I haven't changed. She walked past him into the house, set her trunk by the stairs, tied on her apron, started breakfast. Tom stood frozen until Tommy tugged his sleeve. We getting married today? Seems so. Should I wear my good shirt? Already are. The boy looked down, pleased. I thought something was happening. That's why I dressed nice. Tom sent Jake Harris to town for the pastor, told Reed and Patterson to clean up. They'd be witnesses. Word spread through the ranch hands like wildfire. By the time Tom came in from morning chores, someone had strung up Martha's old kitchen curtains, the yellow ones with daisies. Someone else had picked late wildflowers, stuck them in a mason jar on the table. Elizabeth worked through it all, cooking noon dinner, kneading bread like any other day. But Tom saw her hands tremble when she rolled pie crust, saw her touch the pocket where something small bulged. A ring, maybe? Sam Tate's ring that she'd never sold despite the hunger. Pastor Michaels arrived at 3, his wife alongside. Mrs. Michaels carried a cake, store-bought from the town bakery. Didn't seem right, no cake, she said, setting it on the table. Elizabeth stared at it, white frosting, pink roses made of sugar, a wedding cake. Her eyes went wet. Thank you. Mrs. Michaels touched her arm. You have a dress to change into. This is my dress. Then let's fix your hair at least. The women disappeared upstairs. Tom stood in the parlor with the pastor, Tommy, and 5 ranch hands who'd somehow all found clean shirts. You sure about this, Sullivan? The pastor asked. Yes. Quick courtship. 6 months of watching her walk away every night seems long enough. The pastor's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing more. Footsteps on the stairs. Elizabeth descended, hair pinned different, softer, with pieces framing her face. Mrs. Michaels had added the wildflowers, tiny yellow blooms tucked into the twist. She looked younger, or maybe just less tired. They stood before the pastor in the parlor. No music, no procession. Just Elizabeth, Thomas, and Tommy between them, holding a small pillow made from a dish rag. The ring. Tom's mother's ring, stored these 3 years since her passing, sat on top. Dearly beloved, Pastor Michaels began. Tom heard nothing after that, just blood in his ears and Elizabeth's breathing and Tommy's feet shuffling. Then the pastor was asking about taking this woman, and Tom was saying, I do. And Elizabeth was saying it too, quiet but firm. The ring. Tom took it from Tommy's pillow. Elizabeth extended her hand. Work-worn, burned, cut. He slipped the ring on. It fit. By the power vested in me by God in the state of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife. Tom stood there, uncertain. Kiss her, shake hands. Elizabeth decided for him, rising up on her toes, pressing her lips brief and dry against his cheek. The ranch hands whooped. Someone had brought out a bottle of whiskey, was pouring shots. Mrs. Michaels cut the cake with Elizabeth's kitchen knife, the one she used for everything. Speech? Harris called out. Tom shook his head, but Elizabeth stood. I came here to cook. That hasn't changed. But now I'll cook as Mrs. Sullivan, not Mrs. Tate. The meals stay the same. The kitchen runs the same. Only difference is I won't walk home at night. And we get breakfast earlier, Reed added, getting laughs. The party, such as it was, lasted an hour. Then chores called the men away. The pastor and his wife left with promises to record the marriage proper. The kitchen emptied, except for the 3 of them. Tommy looked between his father and Elizabeth. What now? Now we have supper, Elizabeth said. Like always, but not like always. She sat at the table this time, in the chair beside Tom's. Tommy on Tom's other side. A triangle instead of the old pattern of server and served. Tom cut the beef. Elizabeth served potatoes. Tommy poured milk from the pitcher, spilling only a little. You smell different, Tommy told Elizabeth. Same soap as always. No, different. You smell like staying. After supper, after dishes, after Tommy's bath and bed. Tom and Elizabeth stood on the porch. Full dark had settled, stars thick as spilled salt. Your trunk, Tom said. "Should I carry it up? Where?" The question they danced around all day. "The guest room is full of her things. My room was yours and hers." Silence stretched. Then Elizabeth spoke, careful and measured. "Winter's coming. That room over the kitchen, the one you use for storage, it could be cleaned out, made into something. That's servants' quarters. I was your servant this morning. You're my wife now." "Yes." She turned to face him. "But we both know what kind of wife. The kind that makes breakfast and keeps house and raises your boy. Not the kind that—" She stopped. "Not the kind that—" "What?" "Not the kind Martha was." Tom's ring finger ached where his wedding band had been. He'd removed it that morning, put it in the drawer with Martha's things. The skin underneath was pale, soft, vulnerable. "I don't want the kind Martha was." Elizabeth's head snapped toward him. "Martha's gone," he continued. "What we had is gone. This is different. New needs its own space, its own way. The storage room, then, for now, until we figure out what this is." She nodded, walked inside. Tom followed. Together they climbed the narrow stairs to the room above the kitchen. Dusty, full of broken furniture and old trunks, but good bones window facing east, proximity to the chimney for warmth. "Tomorrow we'll clean it," Tom said. "Make it proper. I can manage. We'll do it together. Tommy, too." Elizabeth touched the window, left fingerprints in the dust. "Tom!" His name in her mouth still surprised him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not pretending this is something it's not." He wanted to ask what it was then, if not pretending. But words had never been his strength. Instead, he picked up her trunk, set it in the corner. "Your name," he said. "I never asked your given name." She turned from the window. In the dim light from downstairs, her face was all planes and shadows. "Elizabeth! Elizabeth Grace Tate!" She paused. "Sullivan now?" "Elizabeth!" He tested it, felt its weight. "What do you want to be called?" "Elizabeth is fine when we're alone. Mrs. Sullivan for the hands in town." "And Tommy." Her face softened. "Whatever feels right to him." Tom nodded, moved toward the door, stopped. "That first morning, when you said nobody marries a widow, you were wrong." "Was I?" "I just did." The smallest smile touched her mouth. "So you did." Tom left her there, in the dusty room that would become hers. Downstairs, he stood in the kitchen she'd transformed, organized shelves, labeled preserves. Tomorrow's bread rising under clean cloth, through the ceiling, footsteps. Elizabeth, moving around, probably planning where things would go, making a space her own, building something from nothing, the way she did with flour and water and heat. He walked outside once more, looked at the stars. Martha was up there somewhere, or nowhere, or everywhere. He hoped she understood that this wasn't betrayal, but survival. That Tommy needed tending, and he needed help, and Elizabeth needed a place to belong. That maybe, given time and proximity and shared purpose, they might build something that wasn't love, but was still worth having. Inside, Elizabeth's footsteps had stopped, settled for the night, his wife now, in law if not in practice. Tomorrow they'd wake in the same house, rightful and proper. Tommy would have her at breakfast without waiting at the gate. The ranch hands would eat earlier, work better, small changes, practical improvements. But as Tom climbed to his own room, he heard her voice through the wall, humming the same tune she'd hummed to Tommy during the storm, and he thought maybe, just maybe, practical could grow into something more, something worth staying for, something worth building on, like good soil waiting for spring, connecting hearts. I'll tell you something true. I've watched too many good people stand at the edges of their own lives, waiting for permission to step forward. This story of Elizabeth and Tom isn't about romance conquering all. It's about the harder truth that sometimes survival looks like two broken people choosing to build something practical together. Every small town has its Elizabeth, cooking for others while eating alone. Every community has its Tom, too proud to admit he's drowning. Maybe you know them. Maybe you are them. What saves us isn't always love at first sight. Sometimes it's just someone staying when they could leave, choosing to make bread rise in a kitchen that remembers grief, teaching a motherless boy that hands can heal as well as hurt. That's the connection that matters, the daily choice to show up, to cook the meal, to mend what's torn. Story note. This work is inspired by historical frontier stories created solely for entertainment purposes. This story does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. The narrative explores themes of resilience, community, and second chances in 1880s Colorado, reflecting the challenges faced by widowed individuals in frontier society.